They say to know thyself is the highest degree of learning. I say no problem. I bought a mirror years ago. Every morning, there I am. I'd know myself anywhere. Employers these days like to know who you are. They run new prospective employees through, Myers-Briggs or DISC or Hogan or some other form of personality traits, creating complex overviews of who you are. The idea is that certain personality types work with other personality types better and in certain ways better than other ways, and it builds up this whole profile that allows them to maximize their view of if you'll fit in right and also how to leverage the most out of you. But what about managers? How does this fit into managers? Do we need all these complex personality views to know if you're going to be a good manager? Should you go through a personality test? This is very cool stuff, but also very confusing stuff. It can get quite complex quite quickly, and how it all interacts can be quite confusing. But it doesn't need to be, because really it's just an arbitrary definition of personality types and how they fit together for us as managers or as individuals. So from the management point of view, what type of manager you are is really important. What your personality type as a manager is really important. But let's cut it down to just 3 simple types, because they're the most common and the most dominant. And should you worry about it? Yeah, you should. So let's call those 3 types, for arbitrary purposes, the shaper, the coordinator, and the engineer. Most of us have a little of each of these 3 in our personality makeup, but one that's really dominant. And it's the one that comes out when we're stressed or under pressure. It's the dominant one, and we've got to be careful because all of these have wonderful qualities for management. There's no right one or wrong one, they all have different values. But they also have negative impacts that we could avoid. And when we're under stress and pressure, in other words, when our management is really called to test, that's when the worst often comes out. Knowing who you are and which personality type you predominate in and what other qualities you've got is really quite important. And more important, having the intellectual and emotional intelligence to be able to choose which type to push forward and how to adjust your personality type as needed appropriately for the situation. Being a really good manager is effectively about transactional analysis. And no, I don't mean some psychobabble. I mean knowing what business, manager, transaction you're in at the moment and which character traits to pull to the front in order to get the most out of that transaction. For instance, coaching is quite different to correcting somebody's behavior in the office. Let's go through these 3 core personality types, and as we go through, see what you identify and which one you tend to think you fit into. So the first one is the shaper. He's a barrel of fun, this guy. He's your traditional manager. He fits the mold a little bit like your sergeant major in the army. He tends to bark orders, be very decisive, know where he's going. He's the leader. That's never in doubt. He or she is the manager you want in a crisis situation. They'll take charge, take control and take ownership and drive it through to a resolution. But they also have some negative traits that you've got to be wary of. So for a start, unconstrained, they're not team players. They're not team members. They're leaders. And they will lead from the front. They tend to not associate and build relationships in the team, perhaps in the way they should do, especially for some team members. They trust their own instincts and trust people that are the same, that are shapers, that are strong and driven. They expect to be challenged either not at all or in a positive, very forceful way. Not the sort of challenging you get from a lot of your team members that aren't shapers. They can be very destructive because of this. They can dismiss players in their team that are quieter personalities, that don't have the shaper drive, that don't make the noise about what needs to happen, or the thinkers or the people that need time. They're the ones that get straight to the point and want to know what the bottom line is straight away without going through the whole process of getting there. Analysis type personalities that want to go through all the process before they get there, even if they think they know what the answer is now, they just get run over by shapers. Out of control, a shaper can destroy a team. They can drive valuable team members out of the equation because they don't feel like they're being listened to, they don't feel like they have any trust or relationship in the team, and they'll go elsewhere. They can make people very unhappy by shutting them down without allowing them to have their say, and they are the most likely of the personality types to yell at their staff and show their frustration natively, for want of a better word. Shapers lack empathy for their staff. The coordinator. Have you ever walked into a room with a whole team there, all discussing some solution, and not been able to work out who's in charge? That'd be the coordinator. Coordinators are wonderful team players, and they're great at bringing teams together and getting them to work. But they're usually reluctant managers. They really don't want to feel like they're telling anybody what to do or being authoritative in that fashion. So they tend to form committees and groups that work together brilliantly. They're great at getting teamwork going, but not great at leading. They are painfully worried about being liked by the team members, about being nice managers. And as a consequence, between coordinating teams and valuing every team manager and being worried about being liked, they tend to get overridden quite a bit by strong-willed team members. The shapers effectively in the team will run riot. They don't like conflict, and they'll steer away from it. They'll shy away from it. So coordinators are great for creating teamwork, but really bad for creating leadership and direction, and also making sure that everybody's on the same page, whether they agree with it or not. Coordinators tend to have great empathy for their staff. Now, the engineer is exactly what he sounds like. He's usually the guy or girl who's been promoted because they're really good at their job. They're usually very technical, and they get to a stage in their career where there's nowhere else for them to go other than out of the company or up. They far prefer to take the approach to management that they would like when they were being managed, which is to be left alone, only to be spoken to if you really knew what you were talking about from the technical point of view, and for that interaction to be one of trust. You're the expert, I'll let you work it out. Consequently, engineers tend to suffer from a great lack of management. They tend to leave their team members to their own devices and live by a rule which basically goes this way: if you hire really, really good staff, you don't need to manage them. And you'll hear that reflected quite often. The concept of being deemed a micromanager is their worst fear. They tend to relate really, really well to the technical staff because they can get into deep technical conversations with them and they feel comfortable there, but not so much with the rest of the staff. They tend to have a lack of empathy for their staff and split their team in two almost always. They tend to be liked by the technical people in their team and misunderstood by the rest. None of these are the perfect manager personality type, nor are they the perfectly wrong manager personality type. Let's go through a scenario where you can see how this works, where you can see how managers' transactional analysis and bringing in the right personality type at the right time from within you and trying to suppress, especially if it's a stressful situation, your natural personality type, or at least the negative parts of that, will make you the most effective manager. So you've arrived at work, and very early in the morning your customer transactional portal has gone down. So where your customers come to place their orders, and the whole place is in chaos. You've got people running around the office mostly talking about the impacts and consequences of what's gone wrong, and they've been trying for hours to try to bring it back up, and you've just walked into this melee as whatever personality type that you bring to the party. So as a manager, the very first thing you need to do is find out where you are, what you know, what you don't know, what your options are, or what your lines of investigation are. You get everybody together, you quickly shut down all the conversation, and you pull them into a room. That'd be your shaper working there. Barking orders, but doing it only to the level that's necessary to get people into a room and quiet. You tell people in the room, sit, line up against the wall, whatever you do, but shut up and listen. Again, that's your shaper. Very effective in this situation. You'll make sure that everybody is happy. You'll take a quick poll around the room to see that everybody is on board and focused. Coordinator, starting to bring them together as a team. This will be subtler and it'll be softer, but it'll bring them in. You'll probably drag somebody out and put them on the whiteboard as a note taker. Again, you won't get a committee together to try to work out who should be taking notes. You know who's good at taking notes and you know who to do it, plus it's a job you just need done and out of the way. All shaper, and all appropriately shaper. Once you've got them all quiet and settled down, the first thing you might do is give them a little bit of a pep talk. Tell them to calm down, don't worry, we'll get through this, that sort of stuff. That's not so much shaper. That's probably more coordinator coming into play, trying to get them to bond back together as a team. At this stage, they're probably focused on the problem and what's going wrong and all of the issues that's going to cause, and to a large degree, maybe pointing the finger. You want to stop that, settle that down, get them as a team working as one. Coordinator. And you'll start to bring personality on personality out to get things moving a little bit. Once you've got everybody settled down, you'll probably go around the room one by one, pulling out what you know about what's going on and what's happened and what the potential options are. You'll want to do it in a specific order. You'll want to go around the people. Some people you know will have a lot to contribute early on. Some people you know you'll want to shut them down. They'll be saying what somebody else has already said with perhaps more authority because you chose them earlier. That's all shaper, trust me. Monitoring that you don't alienate your team in the process, that's a little bit of coordinator. You might have to go, okay John, got that. I think we've already got that on the board. Let's move on. Do you have anything else to add that we don't have? Cool, we're short on time, don't mean to be rude. That is absolute coordinator stuff. With a little bit of shaper mixed in, but true shaper would just shut him down and move him out of the way. You want to make sure he's still engaged and he still feels like he's part of this team. Now some of what you'll get will be opinion and guesses. You'll want to shut those down really, really quickly, and you'll want to pick on specific individuals to go, Ken, you're the expert in this field. Is that possible? Could that have been causing the problem? And if not, if it's really outside there, shut it down. No more conversation. Again, shaper. You want to get people to contribute, but not where it's just detracting from where you're going. You might want to separate the group up at this point. Again, shaper. But once you've separated them up, you might want to apply a little bit of coordinator. For instance, you'll separate them into two teams. The technical team that might have a better chance of solving the problem, what's actually going on, and the soft skill guys, the marketers and PR guys and that who are going to be able to deal with the customers and what's happening now and how we maintain that. Both of those need to be treated in different ways. One you'll deal with and engage with as the engineer, strangely enough, and the other very much as a coordinator. The engineer side of it you will want to have more control over, but you want to control the whole thing in a very smart way, specific, measurable, assignable, realistic, timely, etc. Once you've got to a certain point, you'll have all the information you'll need and you'll have some options. You might have to investigate some options or just implement some options to fix things or put a temporary fix in. You'll go straight into shaper. You'll know who needs to do that job and how they're going to do that job, and you will assign that. You'll make sure that other members in the team that will be really involved in what's going on need to get on with day-to-day life. And you need to make that happen as a manager, that you'll fall into the shaper mode. And you should. If you're a coordinator, they'll lose productivity distracted. You need to stop that. Your people that are working on the problem also need to be monitored and not let to go off to be man in a dark room. Shaper. Now the really powerful thing here is you can probably already see that if you were shaper all the way through that meeting, you'd alienate at least half of the people that can help you solve this problem. If you were just coordinator, you would probably end up with too many things going in too many directions. The meeting in the room would take way too long for a start. You'd drag out your solution time, if nothing else, because there'd be no affirmative action and every avenue would be open to being evolved and engaged by the team. Shaper would have been a little bit of a disaster by himself. Coordinator would have been a disaster by himself. And the engineer, I hope you can start to see, would be in the same boat as the shaper. He wouldn't contribute anything to the PR marketing people, the customer relationships people. He would focus on just one area and he'd lose half the picture. The real goal here is to identify which you are, whether you're a shaper, a coordinator, or an engineer. And if you are that, any one of those, identify the skills that you're therefore lacking from the other manager styles and try to bring those into your quiver. And also identify the skills that are really negative about your approach and try to keep those out of your quiver. In other words, become rounded and also become a transactional analysis manager. Look at the situation, what it requires, and what will give you the most traction and the most effectiveness at that time for that transaction. So, which are you? Shaper, coordinator, or engineer? And can you learn to move fluidly between all three to become the most effective manager?